Hi, welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, my name's DJ and this is Labster Media. This is going to be the first of many tutorials to come surrounding all things video and photo. If you're into that sort of thing and want to learn a thing or two, stick around because I'm sure you will. In today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to do speed ramp edits. A little something like this. It's very popular across Instagram and TikTok. I'll be going over a few methods and approaches that you can take with doing speed ramp edits and different techniques that can be used. Some of them require paid tools, some of them don't. However, it'll achieve a very similar result, and also you don't always need to have a DSLR or an expensive mirrorless camera. You can do these on your phone and they turn out quite well. Let's hop over to the computer and get started. So first thing you're going to do is create a new project, save in a location that you'll easily be able to find. And then what we will have to do next is create a timeline that matches that of the platform we're going to be posting on, be it Instagram Reels or TikTok in this case. So let's go ahead and do that now. So as you can see, I've set the frame size to 1080 by 1920, which will then give me that vertical aspect ratio. I've left it to the frame rate as of 25, because I'm in the Southern Hemisphere region. And we'll give it a name of TikTok / reel. So we can leave all the other settings the same, we don't have to change anything there, and we hit OK. So this will now give us a new timeline window, as we see here. Now you may notice your footage in your timeline is either rotated to the wrong direction. That's easily fixed. So we come up to effects controls, choose rotation, we either add 90 or take away 90 degrees. That'll then correct the upright. The other thing you want to do while you're in here is reduce the scale. As we are editing in a 1080p timeline, or to suit vertical, and our footage is in 4K, it's going to be expanded by 50%. So if we reduce this by 50% now, we'll now get a more full view of what we filmed. This next step is purely up to preference, but first thing I like to do is I like to get rid of any of the audio tracks from the camera footage itself. So we simply hold down the Alt key and we click and drag, select the footage, and you hit the backspace key. That'll then delete all the audio, as we won't be using that because we'll be editing this to a song. Now that we've cleared the audio track from the timeline, we can go ahead and expand the video track to give us a bit more room to work with. So that can be done one of two ways. First way would be holding down Alt or Option on a Mac, and would be then scrolling up on your mouse, which will then expand it to the desired size. An alternative way of doing it is you can simply, if you're happy to use the window in a collapsed view, would simply be to double click on the video track and that will expand it to a defined size. Once we got to this point, we can start now speed ramping. At this point, you'd want to have a song in the timeline, but for the sake of keeping this tutorial short, we won't bother trying to find a song. As we all know, that is probably the longest part of editing any video. Now from this point, you want to then right click on the effects, the yellow effect square. Down in the drop down menu, go down to time remapping, choose speed, and you'll notice the timeline will change. This will then give us the ability to add points on the timeline to be able to change the speed as we need to. So I like to expand my timeline a little bit more to give me a little bit more room to work with. And we simply now will scrub through, find the spots that we want to keep at normal speed, and we apply the speed ramp either side of that. So in this case, I will want to start from about here. So we'll then use our keyboard shortcut, which is in this case is E, we've set up. And we'll then get rid of that to shorten the clip, as we don't need all the footage at the start. We'll come up to about there, I think is where I like it. That looks fine. And we can now hold the Control or Command key, I think on a Mac. Again, I'm not a Mac user, so I apologize if I get any of the keyboard shortcuts wrong. We then click, you'll notice along this line, when you hold Control, it'll change to an arrow with a plus. this means you're adding a point of speed ramp. So we click and add point. We'll drag this out a little bit using these little arms. This will then give us a point of where we want, of how long we want this to hang around for. So now we'll increase the speed of this to, let's go with 500. And what we want to do is expand this a little bit more. And essentially now we'll have a speed ramp. So play that back a few times. The next thing we want to do from there, we can actually smooth it out. So to be able to smooth the speed ramp out a little bit, click on the arrows on the arms on either side. You'll notice in the timeline you'll get this little handlebar appear. Simply grab the top of the handlebar and slide your mouse over to the left. You'll notice if you go all the way left, it'll make it a steep drop. If not, the sweet spot is roughly a 45-degree angle. So from this point on, you want to go ahead, find each of the areas that you'd like to have the video play out at normal speed for a second or two, and then skip out into a speed ramp into the next part of the clip. So I'll go ahead and do that now and work out roughly where I want each spot to stop, and then we'll move on to the next step from there. Okay, so through the magic of editing, we're now done. And as you can see, there's a bunch of points on my timeline, so I've not smoothed any of these out, but we'll go ahead and do that now. So what you want to do, as we said before, is go into each one, click on it, drag it to about a 45, and that'll give it a smooth curve in and out, which will get rid of the jitteriness that you may see when doing speed ramping, especially if you haven't filmed in a higher frame rate of such for the footage to smooth out with. So we'll go ahead and do this. This is I wish there was a way to be able to sort of save this as a preset and then use it. Now with this, I'm not editing any of this to music, but in this case, if you had a song in mind or a song that you've wanted to use or are using, you'd have this on each of the beats of that song to accommodate with moving through the footage. So if we play that back, you can sort of see the idea with it. Now this is a rough and quick clip. I'd normally spend a bit more time to make it look better. However, for the sake of the tutorial, this will do. So one of the methods now that you want to move into, you'll notice it's quite bland. It's quite bland in the way it moves its way around the car. So what you want to try and do now is actually add a bit of motion blur. So I use a tool called Real Smart Motion Blur, which can be found in the description below. I'll put a link to it. It is a paid product, however, there is ways around this with using a method of using Gaussian blur, which I will also briefly touch on. So the first thing you want to do with using Real Smart Motion Blur is in your project bin, you want to create an adjustment layer, and we'll then drag that onto the footage. We'll expand this out. Now you only want to have this for the duration of the speed ramp and maybe a few frames before and a few frames after. Now to speed things up, I've got a preset that I use for Real Smart Motion Blur, so I'm not having to go through and change parameters. But what you would do traditionally is you would go through to your effects panel. You'd then find under video effects, you'll have revision plugins, RSMB. You drag and drop that onto the adjustment layer. And at this point, you'll notice there is a little bit of motion blur there. Now, to make this look that little bit better, what I do is I actually go quite heavy on the motion blur. So I tend to use 1 instead of half. And what you'll notice is when you apply that and you play it back, it adds a lot more motion blur, which feels more natural to the eye. So what we can now do is simply duplicate this adjustment layer across all the areas where we have got the speed ramp happening, and then we just adjust the length accordingly. So we'll go ahead and do this here. We'll expand this out, and a little bit here, a little bit there, just to fill out so that we've got enough coverage for each of the ramps. This one can actually shorten down a little bit, expand that one and that one. So now what we'll have is a lot more motion blur than what was caught in camera, which gives it the feeling of being shot at the correct frame rate of 25 and moving at a much faster pace. So that's starting to look pretty good. So again, this is edited with no music. However, this is the exact same method I use for all of my speed ramping videos, and obviously just timing it to the beat of the song to suit that. You find, just look through Instagram Reels or TikTok and find a song that works and use that to edit to. So the next step now would be we'd go through and color grade the clip. So I won't bore you with the details of that, but it simply involves, I use a corrective LUT, as I found one a pack that I bought that actually works really well for if you over or underexpose a little bit. So in this case, we went overexposed by 1, so if we bring that down, so that sort of gives us a good starting point as a ballpark. So if we play that through now, we'll see now, in some cases you may need to pre-render to be able to preview your changes. So to do that, you'd simply highlight the entire timeline using the INO key on the keyboard. You'd come up to sequence and you would go render into out. Now I've actually set mine onto a keyboard shortcut, which saves me a lot of time, so I simply just hit the large enter key and wait for that to render the preview. And now we can watch this back with our color corrections applied. And as you can see, it looks quite good. So from this point, you'd go through to your final grading to your taste, and you then export it out and post it to Instagram and or TikTok. So now I'll quickly run through and show the other method that you can use. The results aren't going to be as good as what you would get with RSMB. Just Real Smart Motion Blur is just an amazing tool. Now we'll simply take a duplicate copy of this. Again, still using the adjustment layer method. We will highlight all the adjustment layers, remove the Real Smart Motion Blur. And what we'll do on this first one, we'll come up to our editing pane. We'll go into our effects and we'll search for Gaussian blur. So we'll put the Gaussian blur on there. Now this, you're going to have to keyframe a little bit, but what you'd want to do is adjust it to find where it looks relatively okay. So I think around 14, 13 roughly looks good. So we'd then click the stopwatch, setting this in the middle. We'd then come back and reset this to 0. And the same thing here, we then, with the adjustment layer highlighted, we come up to the add keyframe button, add a keyframe. So what that'll do is it'll give a similar blur effect to that of Real Smart Motion Blur. However, as you'll notice, it blurs the whole image, where Real Smart will, whatever's not moving, it will not blur. So that's the one benefit of Real Smart Motion Blur. Now, you can go and do things with a mask. You can add a layer mask and add a bunch of feathering, and you can achieve a similar result. That is a lot more time consuming, so that's up to you whether you want to go that far to be able to do that or not. So once we're happy with what we've got here, we can then simply copy and paste this using paste attributes function across all of these. So let's highlight all of these and paste attributes. Now these will require some adjustment, bearing in mind that each adjustment layer is slightly different in length. So we go roughly the middle, move the keyframes around, go to the next one, and simply repeat this process until we have all the options. Now in some cases you'll end up in a situation like this where it's well off the time frame. So if you simply expand it, that should then show this keyframe. This keyframe should reappear. We simply drag that back, reduce the length of the adjustment layer, and adjust the keyframes accordingly. I try and always keep it roughly in the middle, works the best. And we continue on, so put that at the end, roughly in the middle. Same thing for this one, roughly there and there. Now, the key thing to remember with a lot of this stuff is subtlety. You never want to go too extreme, although it seems counterintuitive because I went quite extreme in Real Smart Motion Blur, but again, Real Smart Motion Blur has the smarts in it to be able to avoid blurring things that are moving and only blurring movement, which helps a lot. Now if we do a render of this, so it's happy to play it. So you'll notice there's still that little bit of blur that happens as the transition to each area takes place. So if we compare the two side by side, let's render these out. So you'll notice Real Smart Motion Blur, this is the first one, and then we'll skip to this one here. And you'll notice it gives a similar effect. It's never going to be the same, just one's a professional grade tool and one's using an inbuilt method, or using a tool with a method to achieve a similar look. So if you freeze frame, you can try and, with this on the very same frame, you can have it play with increasing and decreasing the amount of blur. So maybe even 20 looks better. So 20 could work for being able to get that blur right. And then, yeah, so it's just a matter now of experimentation of what you want it to look like and how you want it to work. And that about wraps it up for this one. If you found this tutorial useful at all, please make sure to smash that like button, and also make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Keep an eye out for some vlogs and event videos that will be popping up from time to time, as I tend to take you along as a job shadow and explain things along the way. And remember, keep creating.